Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the New Liberal Podcast, part of the Center for New Liberalism. I'm your host, Jeremiah Johnson, and this episode is a bit different than the ones we normally do. I hosted a live conversation with Francis Fukuyama last week at the New Liberal Action Summit in Washington, D.C., which is our national conference. So, first things, if the sound quality is a little different on this episode, it's because I'm using my project to a crowd voice in front of a crowded bar of 80 or 90 people, all trying to listen and hear mostly what Frank Fukuyama had to say, and potentially also what I had to say. We're releasing that live conversation as a podcast here on the New Liberal Podcast, and also over on Frank's show, Frankly Fukuyama. We talk about whether or not the internet is to blame for the global rise of populism, how worried we should be about the increasing right-wing control of media. We talk about what role young liberals, like the ones who attended the conference, have to play in solving these problems. Overall, it was a great conference. It was a pleasure to see many of you there. It was a pleasure to chat with Frank. And if you like this episode, please check out Frank's podcast, again, Frankly Fukuyama, which we will link to in the show notes. Thank you for listening, and enjoy the episode.
My name is Jeremiah Johnson. I am the founder of the Center for New Liberalism, and I am very happy to be here having a conversation with Dr. Francis Fukuyama. I would give him an introduction, but I think he needs no introduction. So, Frank, do you have any opening thoughts for the crowd here?
So, first of all, I want to say I'm really grateful to be invited. So I'm really happy to be invited. I'm also amazed at the size of the crowd, and I'm really glad that there are that many people that are interested in new liberalism. If you don't get turnout at a grassroots level like this, you'll never get anywhere. So I want to congratulate Jeremiah and all his colleagues for pulling this together.
Well, it's very fun. We're glad that we're able to do this. But I don't want to focus too much on us. We can get to that later in the conversation, the role that liberalism has to play in some of the things that we're talking about. But I think what we want to talk about tonight is, let's start off anyway. There was a piece that you wrote recently called "It's the Internet, Stupid." And this piece was basically arguing that the rise of populism across the world, left populism, right populism, is because of the internet, because of the social media and the way that the internet connects us. Can you give me the argument? Why do you think that the internet is responsible for the rise of populism?
So the argument, as a social scientist, it's very hard to prove that one factor was responsible for the rise of populism. So my argument is basically as follows. Ever since Britain voted for Brexit and Donald Trump was first elected, been about 8 or 9 major arguments about why we're getting populism right now. The first ones we heard were economic, that it was globalization, neoliberalism, inequality. There's another argument that says it's all a matter of racism, nativism, anti-immigrant feeling. Leadership, plays a role. Sociology plays a role, and the like. But everybody added social media and the internet as reason number 9. It was like ticking off different boxes. And over the years, I've come to think that actually it's really number 1. It really ought to be the major explanatory factor, because if you listen to discourse on the internet, a lot of people, especially on the right, say that things have never been worse. We're going to lose our country. We're going to lose our identity. And actually, the world is in pretty good shape right now, right? The economy is doing as well as it's been for a long time. At least until the last couple of years, low unemployment, decent economic growth, technological progress. Why do so many people believe that we've never been in a worse situation than now? And the time that this appeared was really about the time that the internet was born. What the internet allows you to do is to have completely different views of what empirical reality is. And this is a situation we've never been in before. There are today major parts of the American public that believe that the 2020 election was stolen, right? And we've never had an election like that where you get that kind of belief in a completely different reality.
The force of filter bubbles is just really, really strong. I think we still haven't, as a society, realized, like really deep in our guts, how strong social media filter bubbles really are.
Yeah, but it's worse than that because I think the nature of conservatism has shifted. So, uh, shows how old I am, but, in earlier decades, Ronald Reagan defined conservatism. He was internationalist, he was pro-immigration, he was pro-free trade. That has gotten completely displaced by what I would say is basically conspiracy theories, right? That what it means to be a conservative today is to actually believe in these very bizarre narratives about how elites are controlling the media, that everything, if you take the red pill, you realize that everything around you is actually fake, that it's actually been manipulated. And that's the way that you get into these bizarre differences of interpretation about just ordinary events like, are vaccines safe?
Yeah, and I mean, this has been around for a while, this part of conservatism, if you think about like the paranoid style of American politics, that even back in the 60s and 70s and 80s, you had, the Ron Paul newsletters and the weird the Branch Society, I'm forgetting the
John
name.
Birch Society.
Yeah, the John Birch Society. This has always been part of the conservative movement, but it was relegated to the sidelines. It was not given a place of prominence, and their distribution channels necessarily had to be these little niche racist newsletters that didn't have a whole lot of people reading them. They were locked out of the conservative establishment. And I think what social media did was it took those people who'd always existed, the paranoid style people, and it gave them absolutely enormous platforms. And it turns out there's a demand out in the regular population for telling them it's not your fault. It's all those other people who don't look like you, who don't act like you, who don't dress like you. It's their fault, and we should blame them. And that kind of like very identitarian, almost tribal, us against them dynamics has only gotten more and more prominent, I think, on the political right.
Yeah, the other thing is just the nature of social media itself. So my former colleague, Renee DiResta, wrote a really good book that I recommend called Invisible Rulers. So just a modest advertisement, I have my own YouTube channel now called Frankly Fukuyama, and I can see exactly what she's talking about. So if you have a podcast like the one we're doing now, and it's a kind of reasonable discussion about a serious issue where you adduce a lot of facts and it's very informative, nobody listens to it. Nobody listens to it. The moment you start saying something really edgy or mean-spirited, that's when your ratings go up. And so there's a natural, everybody wants to be an influencer. And if you want likes on the internet, you got to say stuff like that. And so it drives this kind of extremism.
Now, this is an odd question to ask you, Frank, but have you ever heard of Mr. Beast?
Yes.
So there's a parable I like to tell about how the internet leads to extremism, because I think the internet, in a very structural sense, is biased towards extremist content. And I do this not via a political story, but via Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast has been a YouTuber for a long time. If you're not familiar with him, he is probably the single largest content creator in the world. He's got like 300 or 400 million subscribers, some insane number. And there's a really interesting story that he tells about his first truly viral video before he was Mr. Beast, before he was really big. He was like a little medium-sized YouTuber, and he got his first endorsement. This company wanted to sponsor one of his videos, and they said, we're going to give you $5,000. And he said, I want you to give me $10,000, and I'm going to give it away to a homeless person. That's going to be the entire video, and I promise you it will go viral. And he had to argue with them because, he's like, look, 5 digits is better than 4.
Yeah.
But he convinced them in the end. And he literally, the whole video is, I got $10,000 and I gave it to a homeless person in cash. And the video went insanely viral. And what he realized was that on the internet, going big is always better than going small. his videos are all things like, why would I watch a video about baking a 2-pound cake when I could bake a 50-pound cake and make it the world's biggest cake? Why would I do like a video about, something small when I could go strand a guy on an island for a month and see if he survives? Give the next video after his homeless guy video was I gave someone $20,000 and then $50,000 and then $100,000, and he started giving people houses. He's given away millions of dollars, and his only instinct, his only guiding principle is you have to go bigger than everyone else. Because again, why would you watch a video where somebody gives out 500 when you could watch a video where they give out 50,000? And I think that there's a lesson there in that in politics, you can be a little bit against immigration and you won't get much attention. You can be wildly against immigration and all of a sudden you will get all the attention in the world. The internet just exists such that extremist stuff, the urge to go bigger, dominates everything else. And this is like a weird way to say it, but I think that there's actually something profound there.
I think that's true. The other thing is that the platform's recommendation algorithms also do a lot of damage. So it turns out that there are a lot of yoga moms that are members of QAnon or believe in QAnon conspiracy theories. Now, why would a yoga mom be attracted to QAnon? Well, it turns out there was a yoga guru who happened to be a QAnon member, and there was a recommendation. So some computer algorithm picked up the fact that this yoga guru was interested in this conspiracy theory. So to the extent that algorithms reason, they said, well, there must be some connection between yoga and conspiracy theories. And so it began recommending conspiracy theories to people that did yoga, and they should have nothing to do with one another. But, that's the way the machine works.
But yeah, and there's recognizable kind of little, you can think of them as little gravitational wells. There's one over here for yoga, there's one over here for QAnon, and there's one over here for Minecraft videos and liberal politics. And they all kind of like, if you start in the middle, if you're nowhere, you're going to get dragged into one of the gravitational wells, and just the algorithm wants you to fit a type. And even if you don't fit a specific type, they will make you fit that type. But I'd love to switch directions a little bit. There's a book that I really am fond of that was written years ago, 15 years ago at this point almost, by Martin Gurry. It's called Revolt of the Public. And Martin Gurry had this thesis that, people are going to be basically angry all the time forever, and that's just the state of politics now. And he blamed social media also. And I'm curious if you buy his thesis, because his story was something like, back in the day, elites didn't deliver on their promises, but it was okay because nobody ever found out. The media kind of covered for them a little bit, and it was hard to get information. Social media didn't exist. And so the elites mostly didn't deliver, but it was okay. Now, when the elites fail to deliver on their promises, it is very obvious, very right away, immediate, and everyone can see in real time how much the elites are failing. And they fail at the same rate they always have, but now it's just so obvious that everyone's going to be angry forever, and that's it. And I'm curious, do you think that's the whole truth, or that's partially the truth, or?
I think that a lot of the problem we're in today is actually the consequence of good things that have happened. So I think what you're referring to is transparency. There's much more transparency, right? So the number of Catholic priests that abuse young children, I suspect, has not budged in 1,000 years. I think that this was happening within the church, but nobody knew about it because you didn't have these channels of information. The other thing is people are much more educated. In peasant societies, you basically believe whoever is in authority or whoever's wearing a uniform. With a lot of educated people, we're brought up to be, critics of whatever we hear. And so you combine that transparency, total transparency, with a kind of more critical public, and you're going to get more people unhappy with the status quo.
There's kind of a natural question that comes out of this. And that question is, all right, if social media is making us all crazy, if it's making the world more populist, and, we can use the technical term populist, or we can just call them crazy. I'll do the editorializing if you don't want to. But if that's the case, it seems like it really matters quite a lot who controls social media systems. And we've been seeing a lot of, I'll say, efforts to influence that. There have been some big purchases recently. Are you concerned at all about the right wing in particular? Elon Musk controlling Twitter/X now, with allies of Donald Trump buying up TikTok and the things that we see in other social media networks as well. Is that something that you're keeping your eye on, or?
You bet I'm keeping my eye on it. So I wrote an article a few years ago called Silvio Berlusconi and the Decline of Western Civilization, because Berlusconi was the first politician to realize that if you are a rich person and you buy a media channel, then you can get into politics. And then as a politician, you can help your businesses. And so it becomes this completely incestuous relationship between business and politics. That's exactly what Elon Musk did. Twitter was a losing proposition when he bought it, but he didn't buy it to make money. He bought it for political influence, and it worked. And so it's now a political mouthpiece for him. And so, there were always, William Randolph Hearst and, media barons and so forth, but they didn't have the kind of megaphones that the internet provides today. And I think that that's very, very dangerous. So what we're going to see is a big contest among oligarchs, among really rich people, to control these information channels, because that's the route to political power.
And we're getting a little bit into tomorrow's talk here, which is kind of the international panel. But like you mentioned Berlusconi, I know this has also been a central part of many other countries. Obviously, there's countries like Russia that simply do not have a free press. China does not have a free press. But in somewhere like Hungary, this is much more ambiguous in that, like, they haven't legally eliminated the free press, but the allies of Viktor Orban have basically bought up all of, or almost all of, the media channels in Hungary. And that's one of the ways in which, like, Hungary it's not exactly an authoritarian state, but it's not exactly a democracy either. There's a term for this.
It's an authoritarian state.
Would you call it, rather than a hybrid regime, just outright authoritarian?
No, well, it's illiberal, meaning that, and that's the way that Viktor Orban described it. We have elections and democracy, but we don't permit anybody to exercise control. Yeah, so I think that one of the biggest things that's going on right now that people are not sufficiently aware of and concerned about is Larry Ellison and his son David. They just bought Paramount. They've accumulated CBS and the Free Press. They are building a bigger media empire than Elon Musk ever controlled. And so, this sort of thing is one of the consequences of the concentration of wealth in the United States. This wouldn't have happened without Oracle being such a rich company, but Ellison clearly wants to branch out beyond the IT industry.
Yeah, and just to even add on to that, Larry Ellison is the same person we're talking about who will have the largest share of TikTok if this deal goes through. So Larry Ellison will be the largest, practically the controlling shareholder of TikTok. He also, through his son, owns and controls Paramount, which is CBS, and he has hired Barry Weiss of the Free Press to run CBS News. And I believe he is also attempting to purchase Warner Media, with the conglomerate that controls CNN. Discovery Warner. So one guy owning CNN and CBS News and the CBS empire entirely, and TikTok is concerning when he is said to be one of Trump's favorite billionaires. Like, he is very openly aligned with Donald Trump, and it's funny, he hasn't gotten much bad press from it. He does not have the same outlandish kind of movement that Elon Musk does. He does not get the publicity that Elon Musk does, but he is very much aligned with the Trump administration. And just speaking personally, that kind of freaks me out, that much media, both social media and traditional media, is in the hands of a single guy. And you add Elon Musk in there and you start to think, like, how much of the things that we read and that we see are being subtly influenced by people's politics. It's
not so subtle. One of the reasons to be more worried about Larry Ellison than Elon Musk is that Elon Musk, in a way, is one of the dumbest people I've ever seen. He's very smart.
I like to say that Elon is a genius and an idiot.
Yeah.
And you can't say one or the other. It has to be both at the same time. And it's just this weird hyper position of, like,
No, he's obviously very, very good at a certain range of, building an industrial corporation. I wouldn't take that away from him at all. But he has no concept of what other people think and the way that other Americans think. I mean, after he was kicked out of the White House, and people started trashing Tesla dealerships, he gave a couple of self-pitying interviews, and he said, "I just don't understand why people don't like me. It must be that the Democrats are paying them. That's the only reason that they'd be mad at me," right? And that's why he's kind of ineffective as a politician, because a politician has to be extremely sensitive to what people think and how they're reacting to you. That's what's really brilliant about Donald Trump, because he's got that gene that allows him to do that. Whether Larry Ellison or his son have that, we don't know. But, I'm worried.
There's another thing that really worries me almost as much as the outright purchases, and that is kind of the more subtle influence on the media that comes from, I would say, billionaires and owners who are not regime aligned in the strict sense, but they've kind of seen where the money is going. And I'll give a couple examples here of, like, Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post. And when that happened, at first, I think people were neutral to positive about it. The Washington Post now, they won't have to worry about making money. They can just do good journalism. There were some people saying that. But now he's kind of, after Trump got elected, he very much said, like, we're redoing the opinion page to only focus on conservative free market principles. And he purged a bunch of people from the opinion section. There's the LA Times where I'm going to get the name wrong, but I think it's like Patrick Soon-Shiong, something like that. And he stopped them from endorsing Kamala, probably because he just didn't want to piss off Donald Trump. You look at it with people like Mark Zuckerberg, who, again, he's not regime aligned, but he's going to blow where the wind takes him. When woke liberals were in power, he was very happy to be a woke liberal. Now that Trump is in power, he's very happy to talk about how society is too feminized and, we need to stop moderating things. And, and effectively it is giving a free pass to Trump. I also look at, like, companies like YouTube and ABC, YouTube paying off Donald Trump in a lawsuit, $25 million, just to make sure that he doesn't persecute them. ABC firing Jimmy Kimmel or pseudo firing Jimmy Kimmel because Brendan Carr, goes on and jawbones on a podcast. It's all very concerning. And, like, I don't know that I have much commentary other than it's really bad. Like,
it's really bad. And we also don't have a clear solution to this. So I think after 2016, a lot of people realized that the internet was leading to this kind of populism, and they tried to get content moderation. They tried to get the platforms themselves to do content moderation. There isn't a good solution to this problem because the platforms by themselves their main interest is not saving American democracy, right? It's their bottom lines. And so you can't trust them to do that. I don't think you can trust the government to declare what is fake news and what is true. And that means that, those are the two big alternatives in front of us. Stanford, we had a big problem with this because we had something called the Stanford Internet Observatory that was trying to monitor disinformation on the internet after the 2020 election. So this was election denialism, anti-vax information. After the 2022 election, when the Republicans took the House, Jim Jordan headed a committee, and he subpoenaed every single graduate student that had worked on this project and basically
the
shut it down.
graduate students, the ones who hold all the power.
Yeah. But he basically shut it down, and the university, didn't try to defend that activity as a legitimate research activity.
I am sympathetic to the concept of content moderation, especially if you look at the context of 2020. There's some scary things happening in that January 6th happens. We had an insurrection that literally tried to overthrow the government. And it's not just January 6th with the people storming the Capitol. That's a big picture, but also the fake electors plot that they literally tried to nominate a second group of electors and put out disinformation that this is the real one. People are freaked out. And then COVID happens and people are freaked out that there's people are talking about bleach and COVID, and the president is saying to inject bleach. And like there's this stuff from 2020 to 2021 between the COVID misinformation and January 6th happening early 2021, where people just felt really like we need to put a lid on some of this. And I'm sympathetic to that instinct, but kind of like you, I guess, I don't know that in the long run there's a workable way to have the government be the arbiter of what truth is and have the government be the ones who say, this is so far out of bounds that you're not allowed to say it. Like, maybe the Europeans think about speech that way, but I'm very American and I do not think about it that way. So, I mean, what do you think about the European conception of speech in that way?
Yeah, well, we'll see whether they can keep that up, because in Europe, they still have more of a consensus around this old-fashioned liberal understanding of the public sphere. In our country, it's too late. We're too polarized, and you can bet.
We're too individualistic here, I think.
Well, it's not just, no, but all these individualistic people on the right are perfectly happy to use the power of the state to enforce their view. And so once you get the government into the business of declaring what's true and what's false, you can imagine what this administration is going to do in terms of things and it's already happening in universities, and law firms and so forth. There's certain discourse that you can't have, you have to be careful about. So I just think that free speech is in a really deep crisis right now, and I'm not sure the route out of it.
I think it's a really good principle, just in general. If you want to give the government a new set of powers, you should think really hard about what your political opposition might use them for. And if that really unsettles you, then maybe the government shouldn't have that set of powers, just in general. I don't know.
That's a good liberal premise, I think, that we all ought to take seriously.
Well, so I'm curious your thoughts on this, because you said it's a good liberal principle, and we're in a room full of people who proudly wear the label here, who proudly call themselves liberals. And I wonder, is there a form of liberalism that can also get this boost from the internet? Because arguably this is us. This is a movement that started in social media spaces, and it grew enough that we kind of had to make it into a real movement. We had to make an actual organization and start having actual events. But it very much started on the internet. And I'm curious how you think about this. Do you think that there's a natural place for something in the political center, in political liberalism, that can also take advantage of the same dynamics that we're talking about? Or is it something that really only the far ends of the political spectrum are going to benefit from?
It's easier, for the reasons that we just talked about. It's easier to take extreme positions on the internet. You can always outbid the most radical thing that anybody's said. At a certain point, I think people are going to get tired of this, and they're not going to be producing results. Tariffs are not going to make Americans richer and happier, right? So at a certain point, there's going to be a reaction, and I think that's the moment when more moderate, sensible policies, will come into play. And I think it's really important to define what those are. So we're going to talk about this in the conference tomorrow. I'm a big fan of the abundance movement, in the sense that I don't think that you can beat Trumpism and Trumpist populism just by criticizing them and saying, oh, they're illiberal, anti-democratic. I think that if you don't have a positive vision for what you would like the society to be in the future, you're not going to win elections, you're not going to inspire people. And that's why I think that liberals need to define a project that they will undertake that will actually provide that kind of vision. And if you don't have that, I don't think, we're going to do that well.
This has always been one of my biggest complaints about moderate or centrist politics or whatever. And I don't like to call myself a moderate or a centrist, even though there's a sense in which that is true. There's a sense in which if you line up all the politicians in America left to right, I would be somewhere in the middle. But moderate to me just sounds like there have been so many moderate politicians over the years that essentially just say, well, that guy's too extreme. I just want to do 30% of what he does, and that's the good form of politics. And number one, that's weak, and you're not standing on your own ideas. Number two, you're never going to get people excited about that, really. maybe you'll win an election or two, but you're never going to have a true movement behind you if all you're saying is do what that guy does, but just not as much. You really do have to have a set of ideas that you stand on, and it's part of what we're trying to do here in terms of the belief that markets play a strong role in society, but that they don't contradict a welfare state. The belief that trade and immigration are good. The belief that we have to build more housing, we have to build more green energy and infrastructure, and we have to get rid of the things that are stopping us from doing that if they don't serve any purpose. I'm hoping that that's what we do, but whether we will succeed is an open question because the state of the country is not great right now. I don't know if you'd noticed.
Yeah. So I think that events like the one this evening and the one tomorrow are exactly the path forward. That's what democratic politics is about. You have to mobilize people, you have to motivate them, you have to get them to polling places, but you can't do that without ideas. And you have to articulate those ideas. You have to counter the bad ideas that are out there, but you have to provide positive vision, and it has to be done in every single city, in every single part of the country. That's the way democracy is supposed to work. So I want to compliment you guys, you're doing your share. I think all of the local chapters that are represented here are contributing to this, and I just say do more of it.
And one of the things we're most excited about is what we're doing on a local level, because most politics is local, and in America, this is another disease that we have, probably because of social media. But politics in this country used to be way, way more regional. On a state level, certainly, on a regional level, and sometimes even at the city and township level, it really mattered more what you were doing at that local level than what the national political story was. Splitting your ticket with your vote was very common. But I think because of social media, because national headlines dominate and it's so easy to yell at each other across the country, now everything is nationalized. Split ticket voting is very uncommon now. And I'm excited about our ability to get liberals back into, our brand of liberalism into local politics, which is a lot of where, the housing is built, a lot of where infrastructure decisions are made. And we have members, that number one, they're doing the activism. They're trying to, talk to their mayor, talk to their city council, talk to the executive departments. But we also have people who are actually just trying to run for office. We have people we've gotten a few electeds at this point. We have a mayor. We have people in the New York City Democratic machine, which don't get me started on New York politics is very much just machine politics. You have to get involved at the community boards, the district leaders, and all of that. But we are trying to work our way through the system. And actually, if we can make it happen at the local level, that's what makes 5-10 years from now it more possible at the state and national level. So, I mean, we're doing our best.
Yeah, well, the more power to you. So I don't want to get into a discussion of Charlie Kirk. You can get in big trouble talking about that. But he had one idea that was correct. He went around to all sorts of college campuses to talk to students, including a lot of colleges that were not particularly conservative, because he wanted to convince people. And he argued with, he'd invite people to debate with him. And I think that's actually, kind of admirable. And I think liberals ought to be doing that as well. Because if you don't get out there on a retail level and make these arguments, people aren't going to understand what you're saying.
Well, and we do have, we had friends from Dream for America here, which is, their goal is to create kind of a liberal version of Talking Points USA to get people in high schools and universities, and so that it's not only conservatives going after that. I think that liberals got a little bit arrogant at one point and just assumed we would always have young people. And that is not true. The current crop, I think, of 18 to 25 is not as liberal, is not as democratic as the 25 to 35. That we've lost some of that. And I think, frankly, it's because, like I said, we didn't try hard enough. We assumed that we had that. And because we made that assumption, we got, we weren't ready for it when it reversed.
Absolutely. So don't listen to people from my generation, listen to younger people and get out there and do that kind of legwork.
All right. So I think I got a signal at some point that we need to wrap up relatively soon. I'm going to ask a question that I love to ask everyone I talk to on podcasts. It's kind of my traditional final question, and that is, what would you recommend for everyone here? And I'm going to ask for 2 recommendations. Number 1, if they're interested in what we're talking about, the ideas we're talking about, either about right-wing control of media or the internet influencing politics, what would you recommend that they read if they want to keep learning more about this? And number 2, what would you recommend that they do if they are eager to actually take action and they want to do something about it? What would you recommend they do?
So there's one book that I like a lot by Mark Dunkelman called Why Nothing Works. And he basically starts with the observation that we don't build anything anymore, right? In the early 1930s, the United States electrified the Tennessee Valley. It built Hoover Dam. It built the Oakland Bay Bridge, the Golden Gate, all within the space of about 4 years. And he says, we don't do that anymore. We can't do that. The peak of our aspiration
Can I give you one of my favorite little anecdotes about the Golden Gate Bridge, just because you mentioned it? The Golden Gate Bridge, I think, took about 4 years to build. Recently, they wanted to put up nets to catch people who try to commit suicide, unfortunately, off the bridge. It took 5 years just to get the permitting to put up a net. They built the Golden Gate Bridge faster than they could put up a net on the Golden Gate Bridge.
Right. So that's the kind of energy that Dunkelman says is missing, because people on the right don't trust the government, but people on the left have ceased trusting the government either, and they don't think that the government can actually do anything. And there's a good reason for thinking that, because we've hobbled ourselves so that the government actually doesn't accomplish the ends we set for it. And I think that if you read this book, you will understand the shift in the thinking about the possible role that the government can play in doing good things that will actually implement that vision. In terms of what you can do, it's just what we just said. I think you got to get out there and do that retail politics. Talk to your friends, convince them, talk to them, go to rallies, organize, because, ultimately the prize goes to the best organized. And I think that's really, you got to keep that in mind as we go forward.
You don't have to organize, but someone else is out there organizing. And if you don't do it, they're going to win by default. Take a second and think about who that other person might be, and if you just want to let them win without throwing your hat in the ring. So that's a message that I think we all should take. And with that, I think we will wrap things up. I want to say thank you to our guest, Francis Fukuyama, for coming here tonight.